This is Inkvac, and it sucks, literally. It has the potential to completely swing a match, entirely preventing your opponent from using their weapons. You absorb almost anything, enemy fire, bombs, and even some specials. All of this charges your vacuum to shoot a lethal shot across the map with massive paint and damage. On top of all of this, any of your teammates inside the suction cone are practically invincible. They can take a fight without any fear of retaliation, even multiple opponents in the right situation. So if a special can do all this, why does almost nobody use it competitively? Why does it feel horrible to play in solo queue? And why has Nintendo basically forgotten about it despite recent buffs to give it 50% more ink tank capacity? Hi, I'm Tesseract, a competitive Splatoon player specializing in backline weapons. As an Inkvac enjoyer myself, I'm excited to share why I think this special has potential it didn't before, and get people to try it again. And of course, this video was fact-checked by real Inkvac patriots. And if you'd like to see more videos like this one, be sure to like and subscribe. I'm trying to find my footing as a competitive Splatoon content creator, and your support helps motivate me to keep streaming and making videos. First, I think it's important to talk about Inkvac's mechanics as a baseline, just to understand its strengths and limitations. Inkvac is a transformation special like Ultra Stamp or Kraken. You exchange your main weapon for a vacuum capable of making a suction vortex by holding down ZR. This lasts for either 6 seconds or until 1200 HP has been filled by enemy fire, transitioning the special from suction mode to firing mode. You get to shoot a single explosive shot within a 2.5 second window, dealing 220 damage with a radius proportional to the ink absorbed. While vacuuming, enemies within the suction cone or attempting to fight it will have their attacks instantly absorbed into the tank. In effect, this gives you the ability to project a conical beam of invincibility onto an area or teammate. Enemies will struggle to paint their feet, and further will be subjected to a toxic mist effect, setting them up as fodder for your teammates. During the vacuum stage, you retain access to normal swim form movement, including split whirls and surges. The actual suction happens while standing, but this mobility helps to keep up with teammates or move to another part of the map for greater impact. There is an incentive to keep using the vac, as the suction cone grows rapidly in size as ZR is held. The downside of this is there is a limited turning speed, with the cone lagging behind your reticle as you try to redirect your aim. And swapping to firing mode will abruptly eject you from squid form, leaving you vulnerable sans firing the shot. With such polarizing strengths, what does Inkvac struggle against? Strategic overfilling and damage that ignores the vortex protection are the most immediate threats, where popping Inkvac actually ends up leaving you more vulnerable than not using it at all. Splatana slashes, rollers crushing you, and even brushes bumping into you negate the vortex's protection and deal direct or even lethal damage. With how common Splatanas in particular are, this is a real consideration and matchup check that you need to factor in when it's safe to use vac. Contact damage isn't limited to main weapons either, with specials like Kraken charge attacks or Ultra Stamp swings also able to ignore your vac entirely. Overfilling used to arguably be the biggest weakness of the special, but that was before they recently buffed the HP from 800 to 1200. Despite being a defensive special, it was surprisingly easy for a single opponent to overfill your tank and kill you before getting the shot off due to the delay. This weakness is still a concern, but take specific weapons or the opponent coordinating against you to realistically achieve within 6 seconds. And doing so without killing you creates the new risk of unleashing a massive explosion capable of getting multiple spots or instantly overtaking an area. In a macroscopic or game state sense, Inkvac struggles with the value being worth losing your main weapon for upwards of nearly 9 seconds. Weapons such as Splat Charger or Ballpoint now lose their long distance pressure during the transformation, and poor timing can effectively lead to a 3v4 against your team. Inkvac doesn't get almost guaranteed value the same way that Azuka or Crab can, since the support special really relies upon your team to play off the protection and space claiming of the vortex itself. The overfilling risk also goes hand in hand with the map design of Splatoon 3, favoring chaotic fights in the middle of the map as opposed to flanks and off routes. This makes it much more likely for vac to face enough crossfire to inevitably overfill and be left vulnerable, though again the 50% capacity increase makes this less of an issue. While Inkvac's core design hasn't changed over the lifespan of the game, it has received strong buffs to attempt to bring it up to the power level of other specials. The two biggest weaknesses at launch were being easily overfilled and a mediocre shot afterwards without enough impact to be worth it. It also used to deal only 180 damage, making it possible to straight up parry the explosion. The first big buff was a massive radius increase to the shot's explosion and paint, both at minimum and maximum ink tank capacity. This didn't alleviate the special being vulnerable, but it did create a new risk to overfilling the vac and giving them the opportunity to instantly claim an area anywhere on the map. Missing the forest for the trees, a lot of focus on this was being able to instantly cap a splat zone, but this ultimately wasn't enough to see sustained usage of the special. The second big change is the increase to 1200 HP. Many weapons are now unable to 1v1 vac by solely overfilling the tank in 6 seconds, and the actual function of protecting teammates or blocking fire is much more realistic to achieve without dying. The defensive support special is finally not vulnerable itself, and much better able to handle the nature of Splatoon's 3 constricted map design. Now that both the suction and explosion are much more powerful, the special has the necessary tools to actually compete for a slot in team comps, even at the highest level. Vac is such a strong special because it has attributes that no other special is able to replicate. Continuous, mobile, and adaptive invincibility for yourself or teammates can let you completely swing a fight in your favor that you had no business winning. You can claim contested space and protect your front lines as they take positions that they'd otherwise instantly be punished for. And fighting against you again runs the risk of creating a massive explosion that can also claim space instantaneously or get multiple picks. As the most coordination-based special in the game, timing and positioning is vital to get value from Vac. But if you master these, the reward is a tool that can cheat how fighting and taking space fundamentally work on such restricted maps. As a support special, it's also worth noting that Inkvac has really powerful interactions with each of the ranked mode objectives. So in zones, with enough ink absorbed, you have the ability to instantly cap the zone across the map like I mentioned previously. This isn't as reliable as something like a reef slider explosion or maybe a triple splashdown on smaller zones, but you can do it at range and presents a risk to the enemy filling the vac at any given point. And in a more contested environment where you're trying to retake zone, popping vac can prevent a support player like a Dreadbringer or Splash from painting at all. They fill your vac, and then you can cap zone by just painting yourself with no opposition and use the resulting shot to push forward into the enemy side of the map. In tower control, it probably has the least ability to affect the objective directly beyond just protecting the tower rider or providing some protection from certain directions as the tower rider yourself. So it tends to be a bit more situational, but it can be key in securing checkpoints by blocking fire from certain directions. And in overtime, with the 1200 HP capacity, Inkvac now has the sole ability to allow you to live GG strikes. So strikes deal a total of 1237 damage, but Vac can protect a teammate, absorb 1200 HP worth of damage, and leave your teammate with about 60 health left on the tower and able to continue an overtime push that otherwise you wouldn't have had in the first place. Rainmaker has always been the mode most associated with Inkvac, as the objective involves getting a vulnerable player as far forward as possible. Vac makes it almost trivial to claim a checkpoint or make a deep push while your opponent fails to damage the Rainmaker carrier at all. Previously, you ran the risk of being overfilled, but now, without a tool to stop Inkvac early, it can create an almost checkmate scenario. Dealing 1200 HP and splatting the Rainmaker before they take a massive lead has become much more difficult than before. Clan Blitz does play somewhat similarly to zones, trying to claim mid and accumulating resources before you make a push into the enemy base. But the objective involves players scoring on a stationary basket, providing a great opportunity for you to protect them while they toss clams, or while they fight enemies in base surrounding the basket. And it also provides a great opportunity to disrupt the enemy's attempt to push because they're trying to throw clams into a static location. So, with so many weaknesses shored up by buffs over the lifespan of the game, unique interactions with rank modes, and strong playmaking potential, why is this special still perceived so poorly? I believe this comes down to weapon feel and the kits available to it. So let's say you want to run Inkvac in your team comp. Unfortunately, there are limited options to pick from that come with varying degrees of opportunity cost. Most of the distribution has been on traditionally backline weapons such as Ballpoint or Splat Charger or Jet Sculpture, with 96 Gal and Tent Umbrella being the most quote-unquote aggro options. With Tent being a specialist and fairly uncommon weapon, the distribution somewhat gatekeeps you to backlines or more supportive weapons. There's also the opportunity cost in the form of taking the role that you would traditionally run a Snipe Rider in. As the most popular cooler option at high levels of play, this can fundamentally change your entire comp to accommodate a Jet Sculpture or a Splat Charger. And while Cooler or Snipe Rider isn't strictly necessary to win, even at top level, it is an adaptation that's made necessary only due to having so few VAC options. The buffs to NZAP have helped to alleviate this somewhat, as this is the cooler option your team is most likely to be able to swap to, with other options like Heavy Edit or 96 Claws. The opportunity cost also exists in the forms of the kits themselves, with many weapons like Big Swig or Ballpoint having arguably more synergistic kits that could be played instead. Jet Sculpture now sacrifices a Burst Bomb, Ballpoint loses Fizzy Inkjet, Big Swig gives up a Torp, and 96 Gal doesn't have a Wall or Cooler. But of the kits, notably Splat Charger and Tent Umbrella do have strong ones with VAC, making them some of the most viable options to run at the moment. Charger, and specifically Splatterscope, is the only VAC kit with a bomb and can match Snipe Rider range while threatening a one-shot. And Tent, being less dependent on its sub, is able to run beacons and increase your team's overall uptime. Rapid Pro may not have the strongest kit, but with the recent drop to Toxic Mist only taking 55% of your ink tank, it makes it a much more spammable sub-weapon, alongside being a 180p VAC, giving it a niche over the other two kits it has. But one of the biggest difficulties with slotting Inkvac into comps is just the assortment of weapons available to you, because Nintendo has added it to exactly 2 weapons since launch, Ballpoint Nouveau and Big Swig. And Ballpoint is the only weapon to have gotten Inkvac as a second kit special. It kind of mirrors the way Stingray was distributed in Splatoon 2, but this special isn't game-breaking. In both cases, they stopped adding new weapons with it less than a year into the game, but there's no fundamental design flaw with Inkvac the same way there is with Stingray. It almost appears that Nintendo doesn't know what to do with Inkvac because they continue to not give it to weapons. Despite perception of the special before launch, it's had very little competitive use. My hope is that a new update adding more third kits remedies this, providing a wider variety of weapons with greater synergy and stronger subs to better slot into team comps. Much like Booyah Bomb's radius increase and Ultra Stamp's increased power in throw mode, the tank capacity buff is the change that Inkvac ultimately needed to finally succeed in a competitive meta. While the specials and weapons it faces are much more hostile compared to earlier metas, the interactions it has in each mode, along with some powerful options like Tent Umbrella and Splatterscope and Rapid Pro, make it a threat that needs to be respected now more than ever. It'll likely see much less play in zones-only tournaments due to the opportunity cost versus running a Snipe Rider, at least at top-level play, but in all modes environments like the Splatoon 3 North American League, it'll likely see some play. But I don't think this is enough, and that's because competitive isn't the only environment that Inkvac exists in. Without communication, Inkvac still feels kinda terrible in solo queue. Maybe in high X power battle lobbies, it can feel more consistent, but with most random teammates, it can seriously struggle to get value. Without coordination, it makes timing the special to get value much more difficult. I've personally experienced many situations where teammates will actively avoid fighting in the vortex, or refuse to fight a defenseless opponent trapped within the cone itself. Such a supportive and team-based special struggles in an environment where strong individual play is most rewarded, and ultimately, I think this will continue to create a negative perception of Inkvac for a lot of casual players. The tank capacity increase does enable it to live 1v1s more often, but these are likely to end up as trades or punished in firing mode without team follow-up. With a few proposed changes and new weapon kits, I think it could have a better public perception for most of the player base beyond a competitive setting. What more does the special need? Many propose allowing it to transition into the firing mode early, but this robs the special of its core identity and weaknesses. Instead, I think a few small buffs that mostly end up being quality of life would go a long way to making the special feel better to use. First, your mobility shouldn't change when shifting to firing the shot. Being forced out of squid form and left to only run like trying to use tri-strikes leaves the special unnecessarily vulnerable. Allowing swim form during those 2.5 seconds would help it maneuver into better positions and better survive overall, because at the moment, it has a similar feel to Umbrella Shield being broken and locked in hit stun. You go from protection and mobility to defenseless and almost stationary as soon as you transition into firing mode. And secondly, the Vortex should grow a little faster when initially holding ZR. Inkvac shouldn't be a panic button, but the Vortex can often fail to protect a teammate even with good timing, as the cone doesn't cover them quickly enough, and it's visually hard to tell sometimes if a teammate is within the cone or not. It would make timing the special easier, especially in a solo queue environment without communication, without turning it into a panic button. Finally, I'd propose 4 kits that would synergize well with Inkvac and provide just additional building blocks for different comps that aren't mostly backlines at this point. So these would be Wellstring with Splash Wall, Inzap with Fizzy Bomb, Dowser Dualies with Torpedo, and Clash Blaster with Burst Bomb. So my thought process with these was 3 out of 4 of them will commonly use run speed. 2 of these are short-range vac options. 1 is a direct aggro option in the form of Clash Blaster, and the 2 quote-unquote anchors that are getting vac typically play a lot more forward or have opportunities where they want to play a lot more forward, making Inkvac a much more natural extension of the weapon. A thing I also tried to focus on was bombs, specifically with Inkvac. Again, Splat Charger is the only vac weapon that currently has a bomb, and it really limits the ability for certain weapons to be more aggro if they don't have access to a bomb, especially a weapon like Zap or Clash really benefits from having an additional source of damage besides the main weapon. Dowsers provides a very unique synergy with the torpedo being impossible to shoot down if the opponent is inside of the cone, potentially leading to very high chip damage or even confirming a kill with the assistance of a teammate. And Wall on Wellstring would allow it to position in more aggro positions, and also provide the same synergy that exists with Big Swig currently, where you throw down a splash wall and then pop vac, creating an even more defensive position, blocking more fire, giving you more HP, etc. And Clash with Burst Bomb would give it a much needed damage tool, mobility tool, and long range poke option. I don't think this would necessarily be overpowered, especially with Burst Bomb now being 45% and not having a special that directly deals damage to combo with the Burst Bomb in any way, but it would encourage Clash to engage in more team play, to play more off of chip damage, and to thus be more incentivized to be in positions to use VAC in the first place. So, with both the suction and firing modes having received buffs that they need to compete in a competitive environment, I'm excited to see more Inkvac usage at all skill levels. The special really rewards team play like no other, and I hope it can return in Splatoon 4 ready to exploit its strengths with better hypothetical map design. If you have any thoughts, be sure to let me know down in the comments. This is one of my favorite specials and I'd love to discuss it more. Thank you so much for watching, hope to see y'all again.